So that's how I can communicate this message. So again, chapter 7 and 8, please look for unemployment and inflation. So those are the dates that we are gonna meet. And October 18th is gonna be the deadline for all your work, okay? We have like 3-4 weeks, four full weeks almost for this work. So we have plenty of time and we can talk a lot, okay? So so that's one of the messages. So the second one, as always, I like to go very briefly through the headlines. So don't miss this today, the presidential debate. Even though you might have already chosen one of the candidates, it's always worth listening what is going to happen. So, there are two different positions in government. From my point of view, Mr. Biden, I guess, is more pro-equality, and Mr. Trump is more pro-growth. So those are two different points of view. So, so on the one hand, you want to make people more equal, but in the second hand, you want to create jobs so people can find jobs and work and earn money. So, so those are two things, and the philosophies, their philosophies are extremely polarized, and especially in these days. So that's something that we need to so we need to better understand. So also something that has been coming up in the past days is the Supreme Court nominee. So that really places challenges in society, because as in politics, people are also polarized in preference for things. For example, pro-choice versus pro-life, pro-globalization versus pro-nationalism. So, and those are point of views that we probably, like, we live in New York City, and we are very sympathetic with one area, but don't underestimate that half of the, well, this country is divided. So people in the center think differently than the people living in the coasts. So you have New York, California, Seattle, Washington, Oregon, and all these coastal states. So they are very different from people in the center. And I don't mean in terms of race, ethnicity. I mean in the way of life. So so those are the different things, and of course they have different perceptions of life. So so that's going to be important. I want you to, if you have time, take a look at the presidential debate. I guess that's the headlines everywhere. So I also want to mention yesterday, Mrs. Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. So if you have a more idea on how government works, so we have the senators and the representatives. So those are two different cameras. So the senators, there are two per state, and the representatives, they are representing different areas in a state. So we have many people from New York, and it depends on population, it depends on the districts. So so these two these two parts of the governments are the legislative branch. So we also have the executive branch, which is the President of the United States. And I mentioned this because this is very important for policy, especially for economic policy. So many people agree that there is a need for more relief funds. So people are losing houses, people are not having money for eating, for food. So so what happened is, in this case, governments tend to support citizens. So, and the big debate is that one hand wants a 3-point-something trillion. Those are the representatives. The Senate says, no, we don't need that much money. We need to support people. We don't need to support anybody else, like the states. So states that are in bad shape, that 2.2 trillion, that's the last offer of Mrs. Pelosi. So that impacts the finances in the country. So in the past years, the government has borrowed money to support these programs, the PPP program and every other program that helps companies and people. They are money that we are borrowing. So this is not money that we have in the pocket and we spend. It's money that we are borrowing from other places. So the point I'm trying to make is the following. So I was starting the class with the debt clock. So this is very informative. We saw this before. I was mentioning, hold on, how can I get rid of this? Okay, so we have the national debt. Just imagine adding $2 or $3 more trillion to this. It's going to be almost $30 trillion that we are owing to many people. It can be domestic citizens, or it can be people from other countries. So so the share of the debt is very strong. So every person, if you are a citizen and without doing anything or receiving any fund, you are already owing $81,000. But this is for the entire population. But some of the people don't work because they are retirees, or they are kids, or they are people who are in a school. So every person who pays taxes, they owe almost more than $200,000. So that's the burden of the debt. So I was mentioning the gross domestic product. We can see that we are almost 7 trillion short. So the output that we are producing in the United States, this gross domestic product, the amount of the monetary value of final goods and services produced within the country in certain period of time, so is very small compared to the national debt. So so we can see many things like Medicaid, Medicare, big budget, trillions, $1 trillion. Social Security, $1 trillion. This is part of the budget. So defense, $700 billion. So that is what we are paying on interest on this money. And you can see that this is growing very fast. So, so I'm mentioning this because in this clock, we have a lot of information that is very helpful besides the national debt and the gross domestic product. So we have the size of the population. So, so this is the amount of people who are living in the United States. So we are going to review this concept. So this is the labor force. So the labor force is 147 million people. So almost less than half of the population are working now. So we have an official unemployment of 13 million people, but actually the number of people who don't have jobs is almost 22 million. So we are going to differentiate between these 2 points, because official unemployment is defined in one way, but then you have people who haven't found jobs. So we are going to call the difference between these 2 points discouraged workers. So, so people who are looking for jobs, but they cannot get a job that they want, okay? So this is very important. We have 330 million people in America. Only 120 million are taxpayers. 224.5 million are taxpayers. And unemployment, we have 2 different types of unemployment. The official one that is based on the statistics that we're going to review, and then the actual unemployment that includes people who have been looking for jobs, but they cannot find jobs, okay? So I hope you can revisit this website. You just type US debt clock and .org, and you can see that particular information. So it's good to know, because for many people, we are thinking, yeah, sure, improve that program, throw more money to the program. Well, that costs money, and at some point that money has to come from some sources. And if you don't have the cash, meaning you don't have the money in the pocket, so you have to borrow it from some other sources. Okay, so so that's a little piece of information I want to share. So I was mentioning this because these some $3 trillion that some people in the government are asking is for me is a lot of money. So so also Mr. Bloomberg has a very good. So today the debate is going to be from Cleveland, and as you can see, the markets are not kind of like cautious. Yesterday it was a big rally. In the past 2-3 weeks, the market is going up and down very erratically. So we know that under uncertainty, markets don't react well. So markets tend to be scared of what's going on, and that is reflected by our preferences as people. So remember some of the determinants of some of the determinants of the spending. So we have our aggregate demand, that is equal to consumption, investments, government spending, exports minus imports, right? So, and remember, consumption is the largest of this that explains how people spend their money. So consumption by itself represents 68% of the total GDP. So remember, this is also equal to the gross domestic product. And this is called this equation is the fundamental macroeconomic equation, and it's also reflecting how people spend their money. Consumers spend the money in the market. They go to Best Buy, they go to Costco, they go to Ford, they buy cars, they buy food, they buy electronics. So that is what is considered consumption. Investments are money that the business firms are spending in new machine, new buildings, new inputs that they need for the production process. So government spending is the money that the government spends in building new roads, new airports, new infrastructure that is built by the government. So, and the last one is the export minus imports, that is called the net exports, so also called trade balance. So it's the difference between what we sell to other countries minus what we buy from other countries, right? So, so that accounts for the aggregate demand. So when consumption or any of these exports, government investments or consumption increases, aggregate demand is going to increase. Of course, if they decrease, any of these decreases, my aggregate demand is going to decrease. If this one increases, my aggregate demand is going to decline. Why? Well, we are spending more money in goods bought abroad. So, so remember in the previous lecture, we found that almost 20% of the American economy is linked to the international economy, which is not that bad. So that means that 80% of the goods that are produced in the United States are produced and consumed domestically. So that's a very good sign. So our reliance in foreign goods is not as strong as used to be before. So that is a very good point. So, so today we are going to be revising some of these issues in our class. So first of all, I want to go back to this idea. So we are going to analyze unemployment. Why is unemployment so important? Well, just think of it. People who have jobs, they are happy. probably not too happy, right? You have to go to work, you have to dress up, you have to work for 8 hours. Probably you have a boss that is not the best boss. But at the end of the day, you work, you get your money, and you pay for your food, you pay for your rents, you pay for all your expenses. So at the end of the day, is something that you like to do, right? So having money in your pocket, especially if that money is related to your work, so that feels good. So every time I receive my paycheck, I'm happy because that reflects that I'm working. I feel an active person. Just imagine that the person loses the job. So you have no job, you have no money. So you are not going to spend money in goods and services. So that is bad for you because you cannot afford your lifestyle. And this is going to be also bad for the economy because those who are producing goods and services, they are not going to get your money. So Apple, let's say Apple iPhones are not going to be sold. Dell computers are not going to be sold. The car is not going to be sold because people have lost their jobs. So, so unemployment is both an individual issue and also a societal problem. So when unemployment rates are high, people are not happy. When unemployment rates are low, people tend to be more happy. So they tend to just spend the money and be happy buying goods and services that they want. So unemployment, once again, is not only an individual issue, it's also a societal problem. So, and as such, policymakers want to find a solution for unemployment. So in many cases, how do you improve unemployment? Well, if you are a government official, so you are a policymaker, so there are many ways that you can do to improve unemployment. So let's talk a little bit about this. So we're gonna review some of the issues of unemployment. So and you have seen this lately. It breaks my heart. I work from the West Village. I am in my office in 27th and 8th. So I work over there. When I work on 8th Avenue, all I see is homeless people begging for money. You don't see business open. So things are going very bad. So in many cases, these cycles of recession come very strong and many people lose jobs, business are closing. I think COVID was an unusual and extremely hard thing to deal with. Nobody expected how deadly this virus was going to be. And even, I guess, the best predictors were not enough to forecast the devastation that COVID is doing. So I walk from like 20 blocks and I see only empty businesses. I see people begging for money. And then I say, well, probably that is 8th Avenue. I'm going to work on 7th Avenue. And that is even worse. So, so it's not good. So in many cases, whatever the reason might be, unemployment exists. So in some, and the reasons for unemployment are diverse. Remember in 2008, when President Bush was leaving office, there was a huge recession. It's called the Great Recession. The market fell so sharp, almost the stock market went from 18,000 points to almost 10,000 points. So it was a devastation because of the housing market. So the housing market collapsed, and remember, housing markets are a leading indicator of the economy. When people buy houses and buy supplies for houses, so that means people are happy in their houses, they are renewing or they are buying houses, so that's a good sign. When the opposite occurs, well, people don't want to make long-term commitments. So the housing market was the explanation for the recession in 2008. So now we are in 2020 and we had a recession. that is, some people say that we are leaving the recession, some people say that we are not. So I think we need to check those numbers in order to make an accurate description of what's going on. But in this case, these two causes, housing markets or COVID, are bringing unemployment to levels that we haven't seen before. So, so what is unemployment? So how the unemployment rate is defined and computed? Well, just imagine we have adult population. So let me put it in this case. So I'm gonna open this. So let me do this smaller. Let me move this over here. So we have the whole population. Just imagine that on the one hand, you have what is called the adult population. So the adult population in this case is the number of people who are able and willing to work. For example, I am a person who is willing to work. So I am part of this adult population. This is going to be called the labor force. So the number of people who are willing and able to work. And why do I say willing and able? For example, I want to work in construction, but I just get sick with everything. So I won't be able to work in construction. Even though I am willing to work, I will not be able to work. So willingness and ability to work define the number of people who are being employed and unemployed. So willingness and ability to work are going to define the so-called labor force that is going to made out of the adult population. So within the adult population, the so-called labor force, we are going to have people who are employed, so those who have jobs, so those who are currently working for pay. So if you are an intern, of course, you are not employed because you might not receive a pay, or the pay is not reflecting the skills that you own. So also you have an unemployed, people who are unemployed. So those are people who are willing and able to work, but they cannot find work. So they are out of work and they are actively looking for work. Here, I want to make a caveat because looking for work for at least the past 4 weeks. So why is this important? Well, because at some point when you are not, when you are looking for work, and this is after 4 weeks, you are not longer considered part of the labor force. So you are going to be out of the labor force even though you are willing and able to work. So that's when I meant the two different types of hold on, I erased it. You is that clock. So we have two different types of unemployment. This is the official unemployment. This official unemployment is going to be computed in one way, but actually there are some people who are willing and able to work, but because they have been looking for work for more than 4 weeks, they no longer qualified as official unemployed. So they are out of the labor force, even though they are willing and able to work. So once again, so we have the employed and the unemployed. So they are going to be considered part of the labor force. So this labor force and people who are out of the labor force. So of course, if you are employed or unemployed because you are willing and able to work, but some people might be in the working age, but they don't want to work. For example, what if I hit the lotto and I am extremely rich, even though I have a PhD and I have experience? I will say, no, I don't want to work. I want to live on my money. So housewives or now it's called homemakers. So because that includes a big number of men who are now staying at home while the lady goes to work. So so those homemakers probably are not part of the labor force. They decided not to work. So so we have children, we have retirees that they are part of the population, but they are not part of the labor force, right? So we have two different things. So we have people who are out of the labor force. So let me make a little sign here. And we have people who are part of the labor force, right? So if we put together the people who are out of the labor force plus the people who are in the labor force, we are going to have the total population. So what I did here is I added the number of people in the labor force, out of the labor force, plus those who are part of the labor force, and that gives me the total amount of population. So this economy has 94 million people who are not working, they are out of the labor force, and we have 159 millions and change that are part of the labor force. We add out of the labor force plus labor force, we have the total population of that particular country. So once again, the point here, in my population, I have people who are out of the labor force and people who are part of the labor force. So the labor force is going to be equal to the number of employed plus unemployed. So what I did here, I was following this information. So I typed this information here. So I'm going to come back to this. So my definition for labor force, so let me erase this part. So according to the numbers that we have here, so we have 152 million and 81. So we have 7 million and 63. This is the employed, this is the unemployed. So those are the numbers I typed in. So the labor force is going to be made out of the employed plus the unemployed, right? And remember, this labor force includes, so let me make a big call here. So this labor force includes people who are, like, if you are unemployed, let me add an extension here, you need to be looking for work within the 4 weeks, right? If you are looking for work within the 4 weeks, you are officially part of the labor force. If you are looking for work after 4 weeks, you are not longer part of the labor force, okay? So that's a big distinction, because we were mentioning in this case 2 different types of unemployment. This is what we are officially reporting, and every government does the same. They take the number of people who are unemployed divided by the size of the labor force, and those who are unemployed, they have to be looking for work during the past 4 weeks. So somebody calls me today, for example, and say, Mr. De La Cruz, do you have a job? I will say, no, I just lost my job today. Okay, well, you are officially unemployed. So 4 weeks and a day later, so they called me again, and I said, Mr. De La Cruz, are you working? I would say, no, I'm not working. I haven't found any job. He said, well, you are no longer unemployed. Now you are out of the labor force. So these numbers are changing, and this is the way we are computing our unemployment rate. But let's go back to this. We have the adult population. We have those who are out of the labor force and those who are part of the labor force. So the unemployment rate, here I wrote this unemployment rate. So my unemployment rate, let me put a different filling like a green, light green. So the unemployment rate is going to be equal to the number of people who are unemployed. So in this case, this is the number. So this is the number. So my unemployment rate is going to be computed by the number of people who are unemployed divided by the size of the labor force. So as we can see here, this is the labor force. And remember, the labor force includes the employed and the unemployed, okay? So, and then I'm gonna multiply it by 100 because I want to see the percentage. So I can ask for a percentage, but according to this convention, I want to know the percentage rate. So I'm gonna multiply it by 100, and my unemployment rate is gonna be equal to 4.78. Okay, so so that means that out of the labor force, 4.78% are so this is the unemployment rate. There is a 0.78% unemployment rate. So, and the question is that unemployment rate good or bad? Well, I don't know yet. So what happens in this case, I can tell you that unemployment rates usually fluctuate around 5%, right? So
Professor,
5%, yes, please.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but may you please go over that one more time, how you found the percentage?
Of course, absolutely, absolutely. I will be happy to. So let me erase all this, right? So I think that was my case. So I'm going to start filling out these numbers, right? So we have, so all the data we have is the out of labor force, which is 94,360. Oh, sorry. It's going to be 94. So this is the out of the labor force, 94,366. So we have the number of employed people. We have 152 people, 152.81, and we have the unemployed. So people are here 7,635,000, right? So that's the information we have. So we already have the out of the labor force. So we have the employed and the unemployed. So according to our formula, so the labor force is equal to the employed plus the unemployed. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add the employed plus the unemployed in order to find the size of the labor force, okay? So that is clear, right? So then in order to find the total population, I'm gonna type the out of the labor force plus the size of the labor force. So I am adding these two numbers. So so this is the size of the total population. So according to my formula, how do you find the unemployment rate? So remember, the unemployment rate is the percentage of adults who are in the labor force and those seeking jobs, but who don't have jobs. So it's a person who lost the job, they are looking for work, so they are considered part of the unemployed. So it's like these people, all of them were fired or dismissed from work for any reason. So they are looking for new work and they are doing it within the 4 weeks, right? So in order to find the unemployment rate, I need to identify the number of unemployed people. I need to identify the total labor force and then multiply this by 100. So according to this, I'm gonna do the following. So the unemployed equal, so I'm gonna divide the number of people who are unemployed by the labor force, right? That is the total labor force. And then I'm gonna multiply it by 100, right? So my unemployment rate is gonna be 4.7%. And I was mentioning, is that a big number? Is that a low number? Well, at this point, you don't know. I know that this is a number that is not bad. So 5% unemployment in an economy, it doesn't look too bad. So we have some reasons for that, but if somebody asks you, oh, the economy has a 4.78% unemployment rate, are we doing bad? No, the economy is healthy. So 5% unemployment rate is still a healthy economy. So our unemployment rate, according to the official number, is 8.3%. Let's say 8.5%, right? So is that a bad unemployment? Sure, because it's higher than 5%. I'm going to explain this later. I think we have a specific place for that. So did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, good. So so we have the unemployment rate, right? So we also have, well, that unemployment rate came from this table. So the total adult working age population in January 2017 was 254.1. So this is the number that we got here. Out of the population, 152 million.1, something similar to this. and 7.6 million were classified as unemployed. So the remaining 94% were classified as out of the labor force. So as you will learn, however, this seemingly simple chart does not tell you the whole story, of course. So what happens is we are taking a picture of the unemployment rate at this point. But remember, this is very dynamic. People are looking for work, some people are getting work, and some people are still looking for more than 4 weeks. And for the purpose of the statistics, people who are 4 weeks, more than 4 weeks looking for work, they become part of the out of the labor force, right? So, so let's and the question is, what is the unemployment rate? Well, we found it very easily. We divided, as it says in the formula, the number of unemployed by the size of the labor force. Okay, so but that's what I mean. Sometimes these numbers are not reflecting the reality of unemployment. So we are looking here that the official number is 13 million, but actually there are 22 million and a half people looking for work. So why we don't compute all of them? Well, governments have their own methodologies for finding the unemployment rate. So, so in this case, when people are in this transition, they want to find work, but they don't find work, they are out of the labor force. And that is called the hidden unemployment. So hidden unemployment, people who are either mislabeled in the categorization of unemployed, employed, or out of the labor force. So some people might be unemployed, looking for work, but surprisingly, they might be out of the labor force. Why? Because the law, the statistic says that in order to be considered unemployed, you have to be looking for work during the 4 weeks. So part-time, and in some cases, it gets very difficult to identify. For example, these unemployment rates are kind of unique because here, so let me make this clear. Yeah, it's fine. So these unemployed, these employed people includes part-time workers and full-time workers. So in the past years, especially since the Great Depression, so the number of full-time workers have been decreasing. So part-time workers are more likely to happen in the workplace, and it has to do with many issues. Many people, especially companies that are following regulation. Obamacare was a good, well-intended law, but at some point put too much pressure on companies. If you were a company with 50 full-time workers, so you have to pay health insurance. So how did companies got around this? Well, they said, I have 100 full-time workers, and it's greater than the 50. So now I have to pay health insurance. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hire 200 part-time workers, and I'm not gonna pay health insurance. So, so in many cases, this is kind of difficult to capture in this number. So this number, you can see that employment is increasing, but that is because the number of part-time jobs are increasing at some point in time. So part-time or temporary workers are always looking for a full-time or permanent work. Sometimes laws are preventing this to become a reality. So some people might be underemployed, individuals who are employed in a job that is below their skills. So for example, I have a PhD, I have a master, and I spent way too much money on my education, but now I am unemployed. So what am I gonna do? Well, I need to eat, I need to pay my rent. Probably I'm gonna start working in McDonald's, preparing hamburgers. So is that the kind of job that I want? Of course not. So I have the skills to teach, I have the skills to do research, but now I don't do it because the economy is in bad shape. So that allows people to be underemployed. So those are people who are employed in jobs that is below their skills. That happened a lot during the Great Recession. Many people who were working in big companies, big companies that were filing for bankruptcy. So many of these people were laid off, and they had degrees from Harvard, from many places, and many of them were working as bartenders or were working as waiters, because that's the only kind of job that was available. So, so we have also the so-called discouraged workers. So these workers are those who have stopped looking for work due to the lack of a suitable position available. So I am a professor of economics. I have been looking for work for so many years, for more than 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, I don't find work. So I'm gonna be discouraged. So I'm gonna be I'm gonna be out of the, I'm gonna be part of the out of the labor force population. So we have these cases where unemployment is not very clear. So coming back to our table, so people who have been unemployed and they are looking for work in the past 4 weeks are here. Some of them who is taking longer, so they are not considered in the official unemployment. These people might be part of the hidden unemployment. Okay, so so we also have some so we also have a little bit more of statistics. Let me clean this before we start. So let me clean this. So so we have another definition. So this definition is going to be the labor force participation. So how do I know well, first of all, the labor force participation is the percentage of adults in an economy who are either employed or who are unemployed and looking for work. So this is the definition of the labor force: employed or unemployed or currently looking for work. So the labor force participation is going to be equal to the size of the labor force divided by the total population. So in this case, this is the total population, and then it's going to be multiplied by 100 because I want to know the percentage, right? So my my labor force participation, so these 159 millions compared to the total population represent 62.8%. 62.8% of the population. So in the same fashion, I'm gonna do the out of labor force divided by the total population, and then multiplied by 100. So in this case, if I add these two, it has to be equal to the 100%, right? So so we have the 100%. So we have these computations of the labor force, the total population, the unemployment rate, the labor force participation rate. So it's important to say that it's a rate because it's a percentage, and this is also a rate, right?
Professor, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Thank you for asking questions. Yes.
Yeah, I noticed that you said total adult population, and I know here to be considered an adult is 18, right? So
Yeah.
if you're working under 18, before you're 18, is that still considered in labor force, or there are different requirements to that?
That's a very good question. Thank you. So that's a very, I mean, it all depends. So this is the national guidelines. But for example, there are some states that are more lenient in terms of age. So you are allowed to work, for example, if you are, so if you are less than 18 years old, you should be in high school, right? So many laws are following that bar. At least you need to complete high school. So if you, at the age of 18, didn't complete the high school, well, yeah, you can start working. But in most of the cases, that is the criteria, 18 to 64. So, so many states, I don't know which states they might allow, that they might find legal or not legally, like for the purpose of the statistics, to be allowed to work. So if I mean, just keep in mind that these surveys are conducted by government agencies. So they have certain parameters. For example, they call me and say, Mr. De La Cruz, are you a person 18 years or older? I'm gonna say, sure, yes, I am. Okay, so we continue with our interview. Do you have a job? Oh, yeah, I'm happily working at Lehman. I am working in another school, so I have work. Okay, so you are employed. So I'm gonna be part of this group. But if they call me and I don't have job, the question continues. When did you lose your job? I'm gonna say, well, last week. Okay, you are officially unemployed. 4 weeks and a half later, they call me, 4 weeks and 1 day, they call me again and say, are you still looking for work? I will say yes. So how long have you been looking for work? I will say 4 weeks and 1 day. Oh, okay, you are not unemployed. Now you are part of out of the labor force. So it's a very interesting definition that we have to abide in order to find the unemployment rate. Okay, is this clear for everybody? Is this clear for? Okay, so we have this labor force. So once again here, we were able to compute the labor force. We were able to compute the total population by adding the out of the labor force and the labor force. We were able to compute the unemployment rate defined by the number of people unemployed divided by the labor force. Also, we were able to compute the labor force participation rate and those who are out of the labor force participation rate. So let me show you something very quickly and something less scary than this table. I like to show this table because students get very afraid of things. So if I type, so let me go to Google. So Google. So if I type in Google Fred, so you are going to be directed to this table, this website. We made I made reference to this in the past class. So the Fred shows you economic data. Okay. So for example, if I want to know unemployment here, search Fred on employment rates. So here I have the unemployment rates. So this is how the unemployment rates have been since 1950 to 2020. As you can see, we had a very good period of expansion. So unemployment rates are coming down. So this is from Mr. Bush. During Mr. Bush, unemployment rate increased very, very strongly. During President Obama, unemployment rates tend to decline, and during President Trump, unemployment rates continue to decline. COVID came, and that was horrible. 14.7% unemployment rates. Now the latest count is 8.4%. So things are getting a little cuckoo here. So if we want to know the labor force participation rates, so that's also very important. We can see that the labor force participation rate it was declining since the 2008. So that is not a good sign. So that means that the amount of people willing and able to work were declining. So since the Great Recession, many people were filing for unemployment, for public assistance. So then got stabilized in the 2016, in the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. It was becoming a little bit higher. then COVID hit and messed things up. Now, unemployment rates, labor force participation rates are slowly increasing, and we hope that at some point they are going to be high as in the past times. So all this information can be found in this website, Fred. So let me just talk about a few things before we go. I know that I'm getting close to the end. So we are finishing at 10:45 or 10:30. Well, I'm going to continue talking for a few minutes if you don't mind. I'm going to finish as soon as I complete these slides. So somebody answer me probably and say 10:45. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I have 15 minutes and thank you for allowing me to continue. So we can look at different patterns of unemployment. So I was mentioning this 5%, as you can see. So this economy has a 4.7%. And I told you, this 5% represents what is called a healthy economy, right? So the economy is healthy, is in good shape. We don't have any issues of unemployment, even though unemployment is 4.75%. So we can see here that unemployment rates go up and down. In the 80s, big economic events, 1982, a huge economic crisis of international dimensions made the unemployment rates very high. So we have somehow economic prosperity here. So we get to 2008. So so unemployment rates so this is 2008. Unemployment rates went up. So then unemployment rates were coming down, and as I told you, unemployment rates went back up because of COVID-19. But what is noticeable is every time unemployment rates kind of gravitate around the 5%. If I can build, hold on, I think I'm gonna do it. So if you can draw a line here, so unemployment rate is gonna be around the 5%, right? So it's going up and down, but always gravitates around the 5%. So that's something that we need to know. So when is the economy in bad shape? Well, it's going to be in bad shape when this unemployment goes above the 5%. So the US unemployment rates move up and down as the economy moves in and out of recession. So we are entering into recession, unemployment rates are increasing, we are coming down from the recession, unemployment rates are declining. Here, we are having a very good economy. During the Clinton administration, we had a very good economy. So I'm sure that these unemployment rates after 2017, they were down and down. So that is a good sign for the economy. However, over time, the unemployment rates seem to return to a range of 4 to 6%. So, and that's what we are going to be expecting. So this 5% is going to be explained by some factors. We are going to discuss them in a few more minutes. So there doesn't seem to be a long-term trend towards the rate moving, generally higher or generally lower. So we have seen unemployment rate gravitating, but always around the 5%. So, and that is good because in many cases, unemployment rates are not increasing so much like in other countries. But also methodologies used in other countries are sometimes misleading. So unemployment rate in America, in the United States was 4%. And I can tell you that I'm from Mexico, and unemployment rates in Mexico were way lower than in the United States. I can tell you that that is not true, but that's the way governments compute unemployment rates. But anyways, so I was mentioning Fred because this if you click on this link, very likely that is going to take you to that information. So this is the Federal Reserve Economic Data. That's what Fred stands for. So if you want to find it, just go to Google and type Fred, and you will find the website. It's very helpful and very useful. So what happens with unemployment rates when we are stratifying by gender? So that's very important. Who is more likely to be unemployed? Who is more likely to be employed? So in this case, we can see that before the 80s, very likely women were more, women were more likely to be out of the labor force or unemployed than males. So males have more leverage for some reasons. So this gender gap between men and women has occurred for many years. But then the 90s, the 2000s, so we can see that men in 2000s are more likely to be to show higher rates of unemployment than women. So unemployment rates for men and women used to be lower than so unemployment rate for men used to be lower than unemployment rates for women. So in recent decades, the two rates have been close. So often the rate for men is somewhat higher. So so that happens. So this is one of the pictures of the Great Recession. Very likely, if you were a man, you lost your job, and women less women lost their jobs during this period. And this information comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is a government agency. So we can also take a look at that agency in a bit. So when you are looking at unemployment rates by age groups, so what is happening? Well, of course, you are a young, inexperienced person. You are the first person to go out of the labor force. So because, I mean, you are very likely to become unemployed. So as people ages, of course, they accumulate more experience, more knowledge. They know how to do the work. So we can see that people who are older tend to keep their jobs compared to people who are younger. So of course, you are an executive, you are a manager, you are a person who is making the decisions, of course. The first people who are leaving the labor force are going to be people who are younger. So unemployment rates are highest for every young and become lower with age. So, and what explains this once again is the experience, is the skills that you gain in the workplace that most likely are going to be very difficult to replace in the market. So so we also have these unemployment rates by groups. So when you add race, ethnicity, you can see that the number of people unemployed among blacks is higher among black and Hispanics compared to whites. So there are many things explaining the reason why minority communities are more likely to lose their jobs. So in many cases, education, in many cases, experience. So if you compare a person in the market, so very likely that person is going to be a white person. So they have more skills sometimes compared to black and Hispanics. So in many cases, and many people cite discrimination in the workplace that can be very likely to occur. But I can tell you something, and we are a group of people of color. Well, most of the students, as well as so I'm looking at a group of qualified people in the market, and I have been in some cases running some searches for the department. So, and I can tell you that when you open a position, you find not too many candidates that are black or Hispanics. So it's a big problem, and I'm happy this class is very big and is populated by people of color, because we need to get to the level of skills that are demanded in the market. So I think, and I do believe that education is the greatest equalizer in society. You have education, you have access to better jobs. So in many cases, I mean, that's my personal experience, it's very hard to find people who have skills and they are willing to apply for some jobs. So, but as I said before, also discrimination can be one of the reasons why the labor market is not fair. So, so can we use unemployment rates in the United States to compare unemployment rates, let's say in South Africa, or probably in Saudi Arabia, or probably in Russia? Well, probably not. So it's not worth to use or to try to compare unemployment rates in different countries. So from an international perspective, the US employment rate typically has looked a little better than the average. So caution when comparing across countries, these unemployment rates. So you have to realize that unemployment is differently defined in countries. For example, in Mexico, I can tell you unemployment rates were like 30%. Suddenly the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund go to Mexico and say, well, your unemployment rates are very high. We cannot lend you money. So the president at that point changed the methodology. And when you are running these surveys on unemployment, so the requirement for Mexicans to be employed is that whether you make at least 1 peso last month. I mean, of course, everybody make a 1 peso last month. So you can do anything and you get a peso, which is one currency, one unit of currency. So those people qualified as employed, even if you were at a corner cleaning windshields or doing something else. So you were qualified as employed. So the definition for unemployment changes across countries. So here in the United States, unemployment, once again, is the amount of people who don't have jobs and they are willing and able to work, but they haven't been able to find work in the past 4 weeks. So in other countries, the definition might be different. So that's the reason comparison across countries might be not the best thing to do. So also, if you go to Mexico or you go to any developing country, the tools that they have to measure unemployment is not very accurate. So poorest countries lack resources and technical capabilities in their statistical agencies. So you have a bad definition of unemployment in other countries, and then you have little tools to perform that. Very likely unemployment rates are gonna be under computed. So and there are different types of labor markets. For example, in the United States, most of the economic activity happens in the market. So you want to buy a computer, of course, you go to Apple, you go to any store, you buy it online. But in many countries, markets that are underground markets are happening very common. So in low-income countries, workers are not involved in the labor market through an employer who pays them regularly. So, so then many people use barter as the way to do business. So it's going to be very difficult to compute unemployment rates when most of the economic activity is happening in the underground market. So, so almost for today, so I'm going to go very quickly with these 2 slides. So here, I'm going to say something very important. So when it comes to unemployment, so we can see unemployment from 2 different perspectives. One from the short run, so that unemployment that is happening today and tomorrow and is happening within the year. And then we have the long run. So that unemployment that is going to occur at the end of the cycle. So these two different unemployments, these unemployment rates, so are going to be explained by short run and long run conditions. So in the first case, so what causes changes in unemployment over the short run? So in the short run, we are going to say that unemployment is happening because it's cyclical. So what does that mean? So if you remember in your previous chapters, so we have what is called the business cycles, right? So business cycles are something like this. So this is time. This is time. And this is the production. This is the GDP. So what happened in the business cycle? So at some point, GDP increases, then decreases, we enter into a recession, we recover the recession, we fall into another recession, we leave the recession. So it's moving in cycles. Those ups and downs of the economy are happening. So when we are in the recession cycle, that's when we have cyclical unemployment. So the long run unemployment is going to be the unemployment that happens due to these business cycles. So in some cases, we can see that GDP grows over time. So probably we are expecting that in the long run, unemployment is going to be gravitating around the 5% I mentioned. So, so in some cases, we have this cyclical explanation of the unemployment. So what is cyclical unemployment? Unemployment closely tied to the business cycle, like higher unemployment during recession. So from the standpoint of supply and demand model of competitive and flexible labor markets, unemployment represents a puzzle. So this, I think I ran out of time, but this cyclical unemployment is gonna represent some challenges and is gonna be explained basically by someone whose name is Keynes, right? So the explanation of the cyclical unemployment is gonna be analyzed by a guy whose name is Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, who is gonna explain cyclical unemployment. So next class, we're gonna continue with this cyclical unemployment and the rest of the lecture. And that is it for today. Do you have any question? Does anybody have any question?
No.
Okay. Okie dokie, thank you. So I think